I was curious after the episode last week where we talked about Barack Obama and asked whether he was gay, based on the article that had been published in Tablet magazine, where writer David Samuels had interviewed historian David Garrow. David Garrow was the one who wrote the definitive biography of Barack Obama. And in this definitive biography of Barack Obama, David Garrow claimed that Barack Obama had written a love letter to one of his ex-girlfriends in which he talked about either being homosexual or fantasizing about having gay sex with men. And we did a whole episode on it, and I think it was a good episode. But one of the questions that I had, or something I was curious about after the episode, is in this letter that was written, we didn't actually have the letter. Even in David Garrow's biography, the letter wasn't included. In fact, the only part that was included of the letter was everything but the juicy part. The juicy part was redacted. So I was left wondering, and I know I'm a skeptic by nature here, but I was left wondering, well, is it what it's being portrayed to be? Is what Barack Obama said about fantasizing about having gay sex with men? Did he actually say that? How was it phrased? What's the context here? Is this being exaggerated? And I wondered how soon it would take for the actual content of that redacted paragraph to surface. It turns out that it didn't take very long. It surfaced over the weekend. So I want to read you this. This is from a report from the New York Post. This was an exclusive to them. The title is Barack Obama told X, quote, "I make love to men daily, but in the imagination," letter shows. So this is what the New York Post says. Former President Barack Obama wrote of his own androgynous mind and making love to men daily, but in the imagination, according to the redacted portion of a now notorious 1982 letter obtained by the Post. The more than 40-year-old letter to an ex-girlfriend recently resurfaced after Obama biographer David Garrow gave a long and winding interview on the one-time commander-in-chief. This is what Obama wrote. "In regard to homosexuality, I must say that I believe this is an attempt to remove oneself from the present, a refusal perhaps to perpetuate the endless farce of earthly life. You see, I make love to men daily, but in the imagination." Obama was 21 years old when he wrote this. He wrote it to an ex-girlfriend named Alex McNear in November of 1982. So it's a little obscure what he's referring to. But then he says, this is a quote from the redacted portion of the letter, "My mind is androgynous to a great extent, and I hope to make it more so until I can think in terms of people, not women as opposed to men. But in returning to the body, I see that I have been made a man, and physically in life, I choose to accept that contingency," he added. Now, this girlfriend, McNear, the Post says, who dated Obama during his year at Occidental College in Los Angeles, later redacted the salacious paragraphs, which the Pulitzer Prize-winning historian Garrow hunted down and included in his tome Rising Star. The letter is currently owned by Emory University, which doesn't permit it to be photographed or removed. Instead, Garrow's friend Harvey Clare transcribed the paragraphs by hand and sent them to the author. Clare provided the redacted portion of the letter to the Post. So I'm not sure that that's a definitive answer on what he meant. The androgynous mind comment that he made reminded me of the discussion that we were having last week with Dr. Miriam Grossman when she was talking about the origin of gender identity, and she was talking about John Money, this crazy, evil doctor who pioneered transgender surgeries for children, and how he actually coined not just gender identity, but coined the idea of gender as being something separate from biological sex. And his idea was that your body is what represents sex, but your mind is androgynous. And when Obama commented about his mind being androgynous, it reminded me of John Money's idea that you should be psychologically androgynous. It's really weird, whether it means that he's gay or whether it means that he bought into Marxist ideology that wants people to reject gender roles, or whether he bought into twisted sex stuff. It's a little hard to tell, but it does tell us exactly what was in that article, or in that letter, in the redacted paragraph, and we can see for ourselves that it wasn't exaggerated in the original reports. Okay, the Maui wildfires are one of the most horrendous stories that we've seen in a long time. They're some of the most destructive and deadly wildfires that have happened in the United States ever. And reportedly, a lot of those who have died have been children. And I want to say from the get-go here that when we're consuming all of the news about these wildfires, one thing is very clear. Anyone who's telling you a definitive answer about the origin of these wildfires, what caused them, doesn't know. They're doing it just for clicks. But there are a couple of conclusions that we can draw even with the information that we have now. We're going to talk about that in just a second. But first, I want to talk to you about Upside. Upside is my new favorite app. Every year, we all pledge to save more and spend less. This is just an annual thing. But how are we supposed to save when you're paying inflated prices for everyday essentials like gas and groceries? You can't just cut those purchases out of your budget. But now you can get cash back when you make these purchases, if you use this app Upside. Upside's an incredible app for anyone who's facing inflation, whether it's gas prices, groceries, dining out. With Upside, I get cash back on every purchase. It is my secret weapon to staying on track with my savings goals. And it's really easy to get started. You just download the free Upside app. You don't have to be that tech savvy. Use my promo code Liz5 and you can get an extra 25 cents back for every gallon on your first tank of gas. Next, you just claim an offer for whatever you're buying on Upside, then pay as usual with a credit or debit card. Follow the steps in the app and voila, you will get paid. In comparison to credit card rewards or loyalty programs, you can earn 3 times more cash back with Upside. So join me. Download the free Upside app. Use my promo code Liz5 to get an extra 25 cents back for every gallon on your first tank of gas. I love this app. I think you will too. That's an extra 25 cents back for every gallon on your first tank of gas using promo code Liz. But first, download the free Upside app. And yes, it is free. Okay, so the Maui wildfires, the death toll is growing by the day. I mean, it's not even worth mentioning the number of people who have died because the number is changing so quickly. Apparently, the search and rescue crews have only analyzed 3% of the burned area. So we have no idea how many people are going to die. Some of the estimates say it could be up to 500 people. God forbid, I pray that that is not accurate. But I think a lot of us are wondering what caused these wildfires, why this got out of control so quickly. I know there are a lot of theories, perhaps even conspiracy theories that are floating around online. To me, it's a little bit too early to make a definitive statement about what caused this. I think we can make a definitive statement about what did not cause this, and we'll get to that in a second. I'm, of course, talking about climate change. But one of the things that has been my biggest takeaway in watching this story unfold is that we can't trust the governments to take care of us at all. They failed in the one responsibility that they had to the people of Hawaii, and that is their emergency warning system. I mean, this emergency warning system in Hawaii, you probably remember a couple of years ago, it notified people that they were going to be faced with some kind of ballistic missile. People were like, oh, we're getting nuked by Kim Jong-un. And they were like, oh, sorry, someone just hit the wrong button in the control center. This emergency system has notified the residents of Hawaii that they were facing impending disaster falsely twice in the last couple of years. And yet the one time that it really matters, the sirens didn't go off. They didn't warn people. I mean, I grew up in the Midwest, and the first Wednesday of every month, there was a test of these sirens to make sure that everyone knew what they sounded like, to make sure that all the sirens were operational. The first Wednesday of every month at noon, these sirens went off for 1 minute. And no, if you were inside or outside, you were driving, you were in the basement of a building, you could hear them. And it was necessary. And so then when you were used to the sound, so then when in the summer in Ohio it was tornadoes, when there was a tornado warning or a tornado watch, you would hear these sirens. And what would you do when you hear these sirens? You would immediately, this was when I was a kid, so before iPhones, you would immediately turn on your television and see what the information was. Is it a thunderstorm? Is it a tornado? How close is it to us? What do we need to do to prepare? This is a similar system to what Hawaii's system is supposed to do. I mean, emergency response officials in Hawaii right now are trying to minimize or belittle that system, saying, well, it's not a system that's really necessary. All it does is tell residents to look up more information. Well, yeah, that information is necessary. I mean, reportedly, we don't have confirmation of these reports. And again, I pray that they're not true. But reports coming from Hawaii is that a lot of the people who have been killed by these wildfires are children, because school has not yet started and parents were at work. They left their children home. They weren't warned at work of these sirens. The children at home weren't warned. And so they didn't even know their houses were on fire until they were on fire and they died. But imagine if there had been an emergency system that had gone off, if they had gotten a text message and their phone had beeped, if they had had these sirens, they could have turned on the television, or maybe their parents could have called them or come home from work and said, hey, maybe we need to evacuate. Let's look at the information and analyze this threat for ourselves. But it didn't work. And government officials, as they're always doing, are trying to slough off the responsibility as if it wasn't their responsibility. We cannot trust the government to take care of us. And we have to rely primarily on ourselves, which I know is not the first choice of many people, sometimes including myself. But you see things like this and you're like, well, am I going to trust the government then the next time to take care of my family, or am I going to have to rely on myself? And I think the answer to that is very clear. Democrats, meanwhile, are already trying to politicize this, which is the grossest thing to me. People are dying. We don't even know how many people have been killed. We don't even know how many children have been killed, and you're already trying to use this tragedy to push your pre-existing political agenda. It's so grotesque, so grotesque. Senator Mazie Hirono went on television this weekend and blamed the wildfires, of course, on climate change. This is what she said.
Experts warn that extreme disasters such as this one are only becoming more common because climate change is fueling stronger storms, hotter temperatures, more widespread droughts. And earlier this week, President Biden incorrectly claimed he had already declared a climate emergency, which would give him additional powers to combat the climate crisis. Given what you're seeing on the ground, do you want President Biden to actually declare a climate emergency?
I think that we very, very much need to acknowledge that climate change is upon us. There are whole states, by the way, Jake, where you can't even use the words climate change because they still have a hit in the sand attitude. But for example, the Inflation Reduction Act provided some $300 billion to combat climate change and to move us away from continuing reliance on fossil fuels. Yes, there is more that needs to be done, and there will be lessons learned from this ongoing tragedy for the other counties, as well as the county of Maui. Clearly, wildfires is an occurrence in Hawaii. People don't realize that acres are burned in Hawaii as in so many other states. And in terms of the percentage of acreage burned, Hawaii is on a par with other states. There is not enough recognition that we are going to need to combat these kinds of wildfires.
Okay,
we have
enough.
situations
that's
where...
That's enough. Climate change is upon us, she said, and she blames fossil fuels. That's what she blames, fossil fuels. It's always a stupid argument. It's always untrue. It's always unscientific. But when she uses a stupid, lying, unscientific political argument in the face of tragedy to push her own, I mean, what she's essentially pushing is socialism. She doesn't want us to rely on fossil fuels, so she wants us to go back to the dark ages where we don't have antibiotics, we don't have fertilizer and pesticides, so we don't have crops, people are starving. We don't have textiles that are made from petrochemicals. She wants us, we won't have cars, so we won't have, I guess, interstate commerce unless we have a horse and buggy or can take it on our bike. The idea that we are not going to be a society reliant on fossil fuels, I don't think a lot of, certainly Democrats, understand the physical ramifications of that policy. What would your life look like if we didn't have fossil fuels? But I would challenge every single Democrat to try to answer that question. Or maybe you and I need to go around and ask all of our friends, what would your life look like if we didn't have fossil fuels? If you didn't have a car, if you didn't have clothes, if you didn't have antibiotics, if you didn't have mass-produced food thanks to petrochemicals that allow us to grow things because of fertilizer and pesticides, et cetera, what would our life actually look like? It would be awful. There would be mass death. And yet this is what the left is constantly pushing, and they're doing it on the backs of these people who were just killed. And again, I'm not going to sit here and make any definitive statement about what caused this, what the origin was, why it was so bad. We do know from other wildfires in our country, specifically the ones that happened in California, or that happen on a regular basis in California, but I was referring specifically to the 2018-2019 wildfires in California, that oftentimes it's because of humans. It's started by humans. This is not just a random combustion that resulted in a fire that swept this island, just like it wasn't a random combustion that resulted in California in these wildfires. It's usually started by humans. And the reason that it is so damaging is because we have more buildings, we have more infrastructure in places that we know are at high risk of wildfires. In fact, there are some places in our country in California, that don't even insure buildings that are built in these high-risk areas because we already know that they are at high risk of wildfire. So usually the fires are man-made or started by human beings. They are damaging and they cost more money because the infrastructure that we build in high-risk areas, and then there hasn't been oftentimes, I can't say this definitively about Hawaii yet, but we're going to look more into this. But in California, they don't do proper brush control. They don't clear away these years and years worth of dead branches and dead trees that are just like combust and make these wildfires humongous. They don't even do controlled burns anymore. I mean, even the Native Americans back in the day did controlled burns in these areas because they knew if they didn't, what would happen? Nature would take its course. Nature is going to take its course. And if you don't do something smart to try to contain it or give it boundaries, then it's going to be more destructive. That is the story, mark my words, that we are going to hear in Hawaii as we find out more details about what happened here. It's not climate change. In fact, this is a Twitter or an X account that I really like. I want to bring this up. This is element number 4, Junk Science. If you guys don't follow Junk Science, you should. It's Steve Malloy. He worked in the Trump administration as part of the EPA. He was part of the EPA transition. He posts all kinds of statistics all the time about climate change and about weather and about fossil fuels. And he goes, the Washington Post is trying to blame the Maui wildfires on global warming, claims that the alleged 2 degrees Fahrenheit since 1950, this is the claim that the Washington Post is making, that we've increased the temperature on the globe by 2 degrees since 1950, constitutes the strongest connection, as in that's what's responsible for these wildfires. But Steve Malloy goes, but the National Weather Service data for Maui Airport shows no unusual or special warming in 2023. And he posts the graph. We can bring that up on the screen too. That's the Washington Post article that's just lying. But here's the actual data from the National Weather Service. So what's the explanation here? It doesn't make sense. But of course, none of this makes sense because in the whole scheme of things, it's not just about 1 year. That, of course, would be the counter argument from the left, is that, well, just because there's nothing unusual this year, it's been a buildup for a long time. Well, no, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Association, NOAA, we can bring this up. This is the next, this is element number 5. NOAA announced that actually in the last decade, the last 8 years to be exactly, we haven't had global warming, we've had global cooling. We haven't increased the Earth's surface temperature, it's decreased. Despite all of the CO2 that we are supposedly emitting into the atmosphere that's supposedly an existential threat to the planet, we've actually seen 8 years of cooling, which means that it's not just, there are some conservatives and some Republicans who say, yeah, climate change is real, but the political hijacking that the left does, proposing policies like AOC's Green New Deal, that's the bad part. But we can acknowledge that climate change is real and that it's probably man-made. I don't even know that we should do that. I don't think that the science even substantiates that. All of the science that I have seen shows that even before you get to the policy prescriptions that the left offers for the premise of climate change, if you just talk about the premise of climate change, I'm not even sure the science substantiates that. Especially when the government's agency, this is a government agency, NOAA, and this is what Steve Malloy tweeted, NOAA makes it official, the last 8 years global cooling at a rate of 0.11 degrees Celsius for the decade, despite 450 billion tons of emissions, worth 14% of total man-made CO2 in the atmosphere. CO2 warming is a hoax. It's kind of hard to argue with that because it's science, it's actual data, instead of fear-mongering Democrats going on Jake Tapper's show on CNN to try to push their pre-existing political agenda on the backs of the people that we don't even know how many of them died yet. It's such an awful, awful tragedy, and Democrats are such awful, awful people to be trying to exploit that. Meanwhile, the FBI shot and killed a man who was threatening Joe Biden on Facebook. Shot and killed. I never remember this happening before. There are always crazy people who make threats against presidents of the United States, and that's obviously wrong. I never remember hearing about the FBI gunning down someone who made a threat against a president online. We're going to read that story in just a second. But first, I want to talk to you about Cozy Earth sheets. You guys know I'm obsessed with my Cozy Earth sheets. You will be too. You just have to get them and try them, and then you'll know that I'm right. Summer, of course, used to mean that I was just kicking off the sheets every night to try to stay cool. The air conditioning in our room doesn't work very well. But that all changed when I discovered Cozy Earth bedding. I now sleep comfortably even on the hot, sticky nights, and you can too. Simply swap out your current sheets for soft, breathable, temperature-regulating sheets. And if you don't agree that you're sleeping cooler, more comfortably this summer, they will refund your purchase price plus shipping. No questions asked. And you get 100 nights to try them out. Wash them, try them out. If you don't like them, just send them back. How can Cozy Earth make such a guarantee? It seems risky, right? Well, because they are so confident that you will love their product. For a limited time, you can save up to 40% on Cozy Earth. Just go to CozyEarth.com, enter my promo code Liz40 at checkout, and save up to 40% off now. You can try them for 100 nights. If you don't sleep cooler, send them back for a full refund. That's CozyEarth.com, promo code Liz40. CozyEarth.com, promo code Liz40. I love them. I know you will too. They're so soft, so luxurious. It's like the adult version of jersey sheets that you used in college. CozyEarth.com, promo code Liz40. Okay, so I want to bring this story up next. This man threatened Joe Biden online. This is according to the Daily Wire. The 75-year-old Utah man who was shot dead by FBI agents on Wednesday morning for making online threats against President Joe Biden and other government officials was a pillar of his local church community and posed no real threat to anyone, a former neighbor and friend told the Daily Wire. Tim Rich first heard of the incident through a neighborhood Facebook group where households posted about hearing gunshots, and later that a SWAT team had raided the home of his friend, Craig Robertson. Rich immediately had an inkling of what the nature of the raid was. He was Facebook friends with Robertson and saw his political posts, which included one last week in which Robertson said he had to dust off his sniper rifle in preparation for Biden's arrival in Utah for a political fundraiser. Rich said he mostly ignored Robertson's political rants. I just dismissed it. He's ranting again, voicing his frustrations. Rich said, I don't even know how many friends he had on Facebook. I would imagine not many, and that his posts weren't going to many people. Robertson's post about shooting Biden referenced his M24 sniper rifle. Other subjects of his Facebook threats included Vice President Kamala Harris, Attorney General Merrick Garland. A post from September of 2022 read, "Death to Joe Biden." Rich said he was shocked when he learned the interaction ended with the death of his friend, and he believes the choice law enforcement made to conduct an early morning raid led to the avoidable result. And here's why. Robertson was largely immobile. Standing just about 5 feet 6 inches and weighing roughly 300 pounds, the elderly man would hobble around with a cane. He was known to drive to his church, which was only about 200 yards from his home. And law enforcement presumably knew all of those details as Robertson had been under surveillance for months and 2 agents had already interacted with him before the fatal Wednesday morning raid. So I don't know the circumstances. I don't know if this guy was taking pot shots at the FBI and the FBI was shooting in self-defense. What I do know is that I don't give any benefit of the doubt to the FBI. The FBI has tried to target parents. The FBI has tried to target Catholics. The FBI has tried to target conservatives. The FBI has tried to label patriots as domestic terrorists. These are not good people at the FBI. There's institutional rot to the core at the FBI, and they will not get even a smidge, not even a sliver of the benefit of the doubt from me. The troubling part of this is it seems like this very easily could have been avoided. They could have picked this guy up if they believed that he was a credible threat against Joe Biden. And if he was, it doesn't matter his politics or Joe Biden's politics, he should have been arrested. That's fine. If he was a credible threat, posing a credible threat against Joe Biden, if he had both the intent and the means to carry out the threats that he was posting online, then why didn't they just arrest him when he was hobbling on his way to church or when he was driving 200 yards to his church? If he was constantly in and out of his house and he moved very slowly, couldn't they have just walked up to him and arrested him? Why conduct an early morning raid when they could have done it in the light of day in a way that might have avoided this kind of escalation? I don't trust the FBI as far as I can see them. And it seems to me really strange that a man who was threatening Biden on Facebook was shot dead by the FBI and people are just shrugging this off. Meanwhile, articles of impeachment have been filed against Biden, I should say, a little bit earlier than people expected. A Republican went rogue, as you might say. This is a report from Fox News. It says, Congressman Greg Steube of Florida jumped ahead of his Republican colleagues on Friday and introduced articles of impeachment against President Biden. While several congressional committees are building a multi-pronged case to remove Biden from office, Steube said it was past time to take action. He filed articles of impeachment against Biden, charging that the president had been complicit in his son Hunter's alleged crimes and had worked to shield him from justice. It's long past time to impeach Joe Biden, Steube said in a statement. He has undermined the integrity of his office, brought disrepute on the presidency, betrayed his trust as president, and acted in a manner subversive of the rule of law and justice at the expense of American citizens. Steube filed 4 articles alleging high crimes and misdemeanors by Biden. The first accuses the president of abusing the power of his office by allegedly accepting bribes, committing Hobbs Act extortion, and honest services fraud related to the use of his official position. These charges arise from Biden's alleged involvement with his family's business dealings, including Hunter and James Biden's, the president's brother, alleged effort to sell access to then Vice President Joe Biden between 2009 and 2017 in exchange for payments and business opportunities from foreign and domestic business partners. Okay, that one seems valid to me. House Oversight Committee Chairman Congressman James Comer on Wednesday released a memo purporting to show that foreign payments to the Biden family totaled more than $20 million. The second article charges that President Biden obstructed justice, citing IRS whistleblower testimony that, quote, members of the Biden campaign improperly colluded with Justice Department officials to improperly interfere with investigations into tax crimes alleged to have been committed by Hunter Biden. Both the Justice Department and Special Counsel David Weiss, the U.S. attorney appointed to investigate Hunter Biden, have denied that the Biden administration impeded Weiss's work. That one also seems valid to me. The third and fourth articles accuse Biden of fraud in paying for Hunter Biden's illegal drugs and trysts with prostitutes, respectively. Also seems valid to me. All of these seem valid to me. I know that the Republicans were waiting for committees to what? Collect information. I'm tired of waiting for committees. I'm tired of hearings. I feel half the time that hearings held by the House of Representatives and even the Senate are just intended to get video clips for senators and congressmen to post on their Twitter accounts to help them go viral and to help them get more TV hits. I'm glad someone actually had the guts, had the gumption to file these articles of impeachment against Biden. It's about time someone did that. And it's going to be very telling. This is what I'm looking for in the coming days and weeks. Which Republicans are willing to say, yeah, this is obvious. Clearly he did this. Clearly he's guilty of it. And the repercussions of that should clearly be impeachment. This is not difficult. This is not controversial. This is just exactly how our constitutional republic was designed, exactly how our government was formed, the accountability mechanism in our government to hold a corrupt public official accountable. This is it. Keep an eye. Keep an eye. I'll be keeping an eye on which government officials, which elected politicians are in agreement or which ones are denying it. I want to tell you about an organization that means a lot to me. It's called Delta Rescue. This organization is on a lifelong mission of caring for animals saved from the wild, from dogs to cats, even horses. Delta Rescue is the largest care for life animal sanctuary in the world. It's quite sad, right, that some pups are forgotten and left in the wilderness, but they're special too. Just because they were abandoned doesn't make them less so. And Delta Rescue is providing the sort of love and care for these animals who need it the most. This is not an ordinary shelter. Again, this is a care for life, no kill. It's a super sanctuary, you could say, for their rescued animals to play and love and eat and heal and be happy. And here is how you can help, because Delta Rescue relies solely on the contributions from people like us to care for their 1,500 rescued animals. No contribution is too small. Every dollar helps and goes directly to their animals. They also send out monthly newsletters that include heartwarming stories. I encourage you to take some time, visit deltarescue.org. They can answer all of your questions and are happy to speak with other good Samaritans like you. This is not something you will regret doing. Again, that's deltarescue.org, deltarescue.org. You will not be sorry that you visited deltarescue.org. All right, we have time for one more cool thing from the internet. And this isn't even totally random, given that Vivek Ramaswamy rapping clip that's gone viral, which we will watch shortly. But this is a weatherman doing the Lose Yourself challenge.
Going with the big one today, Eminem, Lose Yourself. Here I go, it's my shot. Feet fail me not. Challenge accepted.
Look, if you had one shot or one opportunity to seize a nice weather day this week, would you capture it or let it slip? Today's your day to do that. That it's still technically winter, snap back to reality. Oh, there goes gravity. Temperatures way down to the 50s. Hold your nose, because here goes the cold water. The wind and the cold settling in Friday. For sure, I mean, today we're okay, but at the risk of being chewed up and spit out and booed off stage, we've got a messy kind of situation. Only about a quarter-inch of rain in the last 5 weeks, and if you're a gardener like me, these times are so hard and it's getting even harder trying to feed and water my seeds, plus teeter-totter between not running up the water bill and trying to keep everything alive. Coast-to-coast snows. It's known as the Globetrotter. So that'll do it for our part of the show, but the beat goes on. Da-da-dum, da-dum. You better lose yourself, and Houston Happens coming up next.
That is hilarious. He did that. He actually did that so well. So I've done stuff like that before, where I had a friend at my old job, and we made bets all the time. Like basically challenging bets, and said, like, here's a phrase, here's a word. I challenge you to say this on air, but make it sound totally natural, like work it into what you say. And we did this for weeks and weeks, entertaining ourselves. He did that really, really. I'd like to think that I did pretty well when we did that, but this weatherman did a really, really good job. All right, guys, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. I'm Liz Wheeler. This is The Liz Wheeler Show.
If you haven't already, give this video a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button below, and ring the bell to make sure you never miss a video.